Now, in the first level, we pretty much went through an overview of how Ableton Live functions, some very basic ways to interact with audio material, with MIDI instruments, with MIDI clips, and so we can put it all together to make something that resembles a very basic kind of song. But obviously, we didn't get that deep, and we didn't really talk too much about personal preferences when it comes to uh, genre styles, beat styles, production techniques, things like that. So, we're going to take it back a little bit and we're going to focus primarily on drums and different types of drum programming. Now, we're talking about electronic music primarily, but these are things that can be applied to all different styles of music, just depending on what you're going for. But again, we're using Ableton Live primarily to create electronic music. So, we're going to talk about programming techniques and a couple different electronic styles. Now, I personally am not a big fan of compartmentalizing all these different subsets of electronic music into these genre boxes. That's my personal preference, but I'm not trying to put my personal preference on you because obviously you probably want to learn how to do these different styles. And once you learn how to do them, you can basically bend the rules to create your own unique sound instead of just following a specific genre. So it just depends on what you're going for. With that said, the main things I want to talk about when it comes to drum programming, there's the idea of straight beats. So I'd mentioned that before when you're talking about house, techno, trance. Generally, the kick drum pattern and the percussion is going to be a bit more straight. And then you have certain broken beat styles, which would include, let's say, hip hop and trip hop and like break beats, drum and bass, what was once known as IDM, all those kind of styles rely more on broken beat. Funk is a good example as well, where the beats aren't so straight and there's a bit more syncopation. The rhythm is a bit more loose, a bit more funky. It's just not so straight. So those genres are typically referred to as broken beat styles. Then there's also the idea of halftime, doing a beat that sounds like it's half the tempo it's actually playing at. A lot of this depends on where you place the snare. But good examples of halftime styles are trap music, dubstep. Those are the two like primary genres that you'll hear incorporating those techniques. But you can use this to easily go from making a beat that sounds like it's at 140 BPM and then suddenly going into a part that sounds like it's actually at 70 BPM. You didn't change the tempo, you're just changing the way that you're programming the beats. So these are a few techniques we're going to talk about and explore over the course of this lesson. So that way you'll have a bit more ammunition when it comes to programming your drums and the specific style that you want. Now, before we get into certain techniques, what I'd like to do is I'm going to bring in two different audio clips, and we're going to briefly talk about the idea of transcribing drums. Let's see. Let's go into, we'll just go to the Trusty Loopmasters folder here. I'm going to try to find something very simple. So let's go into, how about, we'll grab something out of this minimal techno folder real fast. And as you can hear, it's coming from a minimal techno folder. It's a very, very straight beat. And if I bring this clip in, okay, listening to this clip, looking at the waveform and getting a sense for how these beats line up against my beat grid will give me a lot of information when it comes to trying to program a beat that's similar in style. So I turn the volume down here so it's not going to be too loud. Let's play this. So the first thing I'm noticing, let me turn on my metronome. Turn that thing down. Every tick of the metronome, there's a kick drum. And we know that the metronome ticks every beat, every quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So what can we say about this drum beat right off the bat? Well, we can hear that there's a kick drum that's playing, and the kick drum seems like it's playing every quarter note, every beat. Now, that's significant because if we decide that we want to recreate that drum beat ourselves, for example, let's go ahead and grab a kit, a drum rack kit. And in this case, I'm going to go and grab the 909 kit. This is a kit that all of you should have. And if you don't, you can download it for free from the Ableton website. There's a 909, oops, that's 909 kick. I want the kit. So let me go down to the kit. Here we go, 909 Kit Classic. Now I'm using the 909 kit because this is something that you'll hear associated with more straight beat styles, where the 808 kit is typically more associated with hip hop, with bass music, with things that incorporate more broken beats. Not always, but just generally. So here's my 909 kit. Using my computer keyboard, I have to make sure I go down by 2 octaves because it starts off at C3. Now it's at C2. and now we're at C1. So the beauty of having audio material that's warped means that we can play this. I can create a MIDI clip here, and I can basically play this MIDI clip alongside the audio clip with both of them being perfectly in sync, and then I can try to recreate this beat. So what's the first thing I hear? Is the kick drum that's playing every beat, every quarter note. So let me switch to my pencil tool. The first beat is here, 1. Second beat is 1.2. Third beat, 1.3. Fourth beat, 1.4. We're like halfway there. Now, when it comes to figuring out the other sounds in this beat, that's where we got to listen very carefully. Now, I hear something going. That's probably a closed hi-hat. Okay, and if we count along to the beat, if we count the quarter notes, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if we're counting eighth notes, an eighth note is half the length of a quarter note. You count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. The ands are directly in between the beats. 1 and 2 and. The and basically falls on the dot 3 of the beat. So we have beat 1, 1.1.3. That's the and. That's the eighth note between the two beats. 1.2 is the second beat. 1.2.3 is the and between beat 2 and beat 3. It's the eighth note between these two quarter notes. And a lot of the straight beat styles, especially this one that we're hearing, is going to have a closed hi-hat that hits in between. So I have a closed hi-hat here, and I'm going to start drawing this in. All right, let's mute our audio clip. Okay, so far, sounds about right. Now we also have that other percussive sound. Now, we know how to count quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. We know how to count eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Counting 16th notes is a little bit more complicated if the tempo's faster, but it's not that big of a deal. You count it as 1 E and a, 2 E and a. So the numbers are still the beats. The and is still the eighth note in between. What you're adding is an E and an a. 1 E and a. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. You're taking that one beat and you're breaking it into 4 even parts. And if we look at our beat grid here, look at that. We're looking at 16th notes. Each beat is broken into 4 lines. So if we listen to this again, when that closed hi-hat hits, there's also a percussive sound that plays right when the closed hi-hat hits and immediately after it, before the next kick. So that means that it's playing on the eighth note between the beats and also playing on the very next 16th note. The more you start listening to the music that you're into and trying to figure out how to program certain styles of drums and whatnot, you want to kind of tune your ears to these sort of things, okay? Really break down how the beat is programmed by the individual sounds. It'll make it a bit easier to come up with different production techniques when you get familiar with what some of your favorite producers are doing. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and just draw in the element that would fit that role. I'm trying to think what would be the appropriate sound for that. Not that. Maybe a clave? Do we have a clave in here? Oops, not you. All right, this kit is pretty limited, so we're going to just use the rim shot. And again, I'm hearing this fall under the closed hi-hat and then the 16th note right after that. So So the sounds aren't exact, but the rhythm is. So if you're not familiar with programming drums, if you're not that confident in programming drums in different styles, this is probably one of the best ways to start learning. Bring in some pre-cut audio loops, whether from a sample library or whatever it is. Listen to it and try to analyze how the beat's put together. Put a MIDI track next to it and see if you can program the beat yourself. Try to recreate it. Try to transcribe the drum beat. This is a great practice, and especially if you're trying out different styles that you're not as familiar with, it's a really, really useful learning tool. It'll probably add a lot of production variety to your tool set.